Welcome to Lesson 5-6. In today's lesson, you'll be learning how to divide decimals by whole numbers. And I've got good news for you. You already know how to do this. This will just be a quick review. The process of dividing a decimal dividend by a whole number divisor is no different than what you've done in previous lessons. So you're still going to follow the steps of divide, multiply, subtract, bring down, and repeat. The only difference now is that your dividend will have a decimal at some point in the problem. Let's go ahead and take a look at this first example. The first step to dividing any problem where you have a decimal is to bring that decimal right up to the top and drop it into place in the exact position it is in the dividend, the number underneath. Now we start our process. We try to divide 3 into 2. Because that can't work, 3 will have to go into 20. We know 3 will go into 20 6 times. Now we multiply. 6 times 3 is 18. And now we have to subtract, and we get 2. We simply continue on by bringing down, just as we always have. Even though there's a decimal there, we still have a number to bring down. 3 is going to go into 22 this time. We know 3 can go into 22 7 times. 3 times 7 is 21. We subtract, and we get 1. We have another value to bring down, and we have a 5 there. 3 will now divide 15. 3 can go into 15 5 times. 3 times 5 will make 15. We subtract, and we have 0. There's nothing left to bring down, and so my final quotient will be 6 75/100. Nothing new, exactly the same process. The only difference was we added the decimal to the top before we began dividing. Now we'll move on to dividing dividends with decimals with double-digit divisors. And there's going to be no monkeying around because, again, there's nothing new. We're going to follow the exact same process. All you have to do is take that decimal, put it right up above where it is in the dividend, and divide around it, following the exact same steps you have in all the problems you've done previously. So I'll have to imagine that 38 is dividing 161, because I know it can't divide 1 or 16. And it will go in approximately 4 times. And I know that because 38 is about 40, and 40 times 4 is 160. So now I'm going to multiply that out, and I'll get 152. Remember, you can always do the multiplication on the side if you can't do it in your head, so that you make sure that you aren't making any mistakes. But I'm going to subtract the way I always have, and here I'll end up with 9. And now 38 will divide 91 because I bring down the 1. 38 is going to be able to go into 91 2 times. 2 times that 91 will be 76. If I subtract, I end up with 15. Now 38 cannot divide 15, so we have to bring down that 2. And we already know that 38 times 4 is 152, so we can repeat that 4. We multiply 4 and 38. Again, we have 152. We subtract and have 0. Because I have a 0 here and nothing over here to bring down, I know my problem is complete, and the quotient will be 4 24/100. In the first two problems you saw, we were able to end the decimal because after our final subtraction, we had a 0. However, there may come a time where you don't get a 0, and you're going to want to continue on your quotient to contain a decimal value. So let's take a look at what will happen there. Let's say, for example, we have 8 going into 78. we know that 8 cannot go into 7, so instead it will have to divide 78. 8 can go into 78 9 times. 9 times 8 is 72. If we subtract that, we get 6. Now, before, we would simply say that the answer was 9 with a remainder of 6. But now, we know that we can actually continue dividing. All you have to do is add a decimal to the end of the whole number dividend, and then bring that decimal up above, and add a 0 after. Now we can continue dividing by simply bringing down that 0 so that 8 can go into 60. 8 will go into 60 7 times, because 7 times 8 is 56. And I subtract, and now I have 4. But if I'm trying to have a decimal in my quotient, I can't have a remainder, so instead I have to continue on. I just add another 0, and I can bring it down, and now 8 will divide 40. 8 can go into 40 5 times. 5 times 8 is 40. I subtract and get 0. Because I have a 0 here, and there's nothing here to bring down, I know I can end. However, if I didn't get a 0 after subtracting, I could keep adding zeros and continue dividing. Over here, we have a decimal already in, but what we're going to see is that when we divide, we might have to continue dividing just by adding a 0. So we bring our decimal point up as we've shown here. 2 will divide 2 will divide 6 3 times. 2 times 3 will make 6. I subtract and get 0. I bring down the 6. 2 will go into 6 again 3 times. 3 times 2 is 6. I subtract and get 0. And now I bring down the 5. 2 can only go into 5 twice, which only gives me 4. So now when I subtract, I have 1 left. Because I can't have a remainder when I have a decimal in my quotient, I simply add a 0, bring it down, and now 2 can go into 10. It will go into 10 5 times. 5 times 2 is 10, and now I have 0, and I can complete my problem. So the total answer is 3 325 thousandths. Here are 3 sample problems for you to try, which use all 3 strategies that were shown in this video. But I see great success in your future because you already know how to do this. There's nothing new. Go ahead and pause your video now and see if you can solve these 3 problems. Okay, let's check your work. We'll begin with the first problem. The first thing we know we always will do is bring that decimal up and put it right above where it is in the dividend. Now 8's going to divide 47. It's going to be able to go in 5 times. 5 times 8 will give me 40. Subtract, and I'll have 7 left. Now I can bring down the 6. 8 is now able to divide 76 9 times. 9 times 8 is 72. Subtract, and we get 4. Bring down the 8. 8 will go into 48 6 times. 6 times 8 is 48. I have 0, and now I know I can end the problem, and the answer is 5 96/100. Now we can go on and check the second problem. For the second problem, I know that 2 can go into 58. It can't go in 3 times. 22 can go into 58. It can't go in 3 times because that would give me 66. So I know it's going to go in at least twice. 2 times 22 is 44. I'll subtract that and get 14. Now I look and see, since 22 cannot divide 14, instead it's going to have to divide 140 by bringing down that 0. 22 will be able to go into 140 about, well, You know, I want to say it should be able to go in 7 times, because I know 22 is close to 20, and 20 times 7 is 140, but that's actually 22 and not 20, so we'll use 6 instead. So we'll do 22 times 6 here on the side just to check our work. 22 times 6 gives me 132. So I'm definitely glad I went with 6 instead of 7, because 7 would have been much too high. It would have been an overestimate. I use 132, and I subtract and get 8. And now I can bring down this next 8. 22 can go into 88 4 times. And so I'm done. The answer is 264. Right? Right? No, and I'm sure you guys caught my mistake. What didn't I do? I didn't start by putting the decimal up where it goes in the quotient above where it is in the dividend. So the actual answer should be 26 4/10 and not 264. So you can see how important it is that you actually put the decimal point in as soon as you can. So now we'll move over to the last problem. In this problem, what we're going to see is that we're going to have to extend the decimal by adding zeros. And hopefully you found that when you solved it for yourself. So we first begin, of course, by putting our decimal point above the dividend right where it is. And now we have to divide 26 into 42. So I look at that and I know that 26 can only go into 42 one time, because 26 times 2 would give me 52, and that would be too large. So 1 times 26 is 26, and I'll subtract. That gives me 3, and this is 12. And so 12 minus 6 is 6, 3 minus 2 is 1. And 26 cannot go into 16, so I'll need to bring down that 2. And I'm going to want to use my estimation and test some things out again before I go ahead with my quotient. Now, when I use my estimates, I know that 26 is close to 30. And I know that 30 times 5 is going to be 150. And 30 times 6 is going to be 180, which would be too large. But I remind myself that this is actually 26 and not 30. So I try 26 times 6 kind of off to the side just to see what will happen. And I know that 6 times 6 is 36, and 6 times 2 is 12, plus my 3 will give me 156, and that's actually only 6 away from 162, so it looks like that's a better estimate than using 5, so we're going to go ahead and go with that. So I put the 6 up top, and I have my 156, and I need to subtract. This becomes a 5, this is a 12. 12 minus 6 is 6, and the rest is zeros. And I have to bring down that 5. And now I have to try to divide 26 into 65. Well, earlier I already said that I knew that double 26, or 26 times 2, was 52, and that seems close enough to me, so we're going to try that. I put the 2 up, and I have 52, and I subtract, and I'm going to get, this is a 5 now. Oop, I don't actually need to borrow. What am I doing? Let's go back. So, I don't need to borrow at all. 5 subtract 2 is 3, and 6 subtract 5 is 1, but 26 can't divide 13. So now I have to extend by adding the 0. And I already know from doing my work earlier that 26 times 6 was 156. So it would make sense to me now to try 26 times 5, because that's fairly close to the 130 I need. Again, I'm going to use my scratch paper, or my scratch screen, I guess. And I do 6 times 5 gives me 30. 5 times 2 is 10, plus the 3 is 13. Perfect, right on the nose. So I put my 5 above. 5 and 26 is 130. I subtract and have 0, and my answer is complete. And you should have gotten a final answer of 16 and 25 hundredths as well. Remember, guys, we'll be practicing this tomorrow in class. Be sure to be ready to ask questions from Mr. Hall or Mrs. Brose if there's anything you need to know to be supported. Looking forward to seeing you then.